This is TOEFL IBT speaking test, and this test evaluates your ability to communicate in English in an academic setting. It consists of 4 tasks. Task 1, express an opinion on a familiar topic. Listening passage, conversation. Student 1 supports the policy, says it's difficult to concentrate in the library because people are often chatting or watching videos without headphones. They believe the quiet zones will finally offer students a place where they can read or write in peace, especially during midterms and finals. They also mention that the rest of the library will still be available for group work, so it's a fair balance. Student 2 opposes the policy, thinks the policy is too rigid. Points out that not all students have access to private study areas at home, so the library is their only place to meet classmates and discuss assignments. They feel that turning parts of the library into silent areas will limit collaboration. They're also concerned that enforcing silence might create uncomfortable confrontations between students and staff. Listening passage, lecture. The professor elaborates on the concept using 2 real-life examples. In the first, she talks about retail pricing. A store might label a jacket with an original price of $200 but sell it for $99. Even though the jacket may never have truly been worth $200, the original number makes the $99 price seem like a great deal. Shoppers are anchored to the $200 figure and feel like they're getting a bargain. In the second example, the professor describes a job interview scenario. If a company offers a starting salary of $35,000, even if the applicant was hoping for $40,000, the conversation will now center around that lower figure. Because of the anchor, the applicant might accept less than they originally intended. Question: explain the concept of anchoring bias using examples from the professor's lecture. Task 4. Integrated Speaking, Academic Lecture, Extended, Listening Passage, Lecture. The professor introduces the concept of allelopathy in plant biology, a process in which certain plants release biochemicals into the environment that negatively affect the growth and survival of nearby plants. This can be a competitive strategy to reduce the number of neighboring plants and ensure better access to sunlight, water, and nutrients. She explains that the black walnut tree is a classic example. It produces a substance called juglone, which is toxic to many other plants like tomatoes, peppers, and potatoes. Gardeners often find that plants don't grow well near black walnut trees for this reason. She also brings up sunflowers. While many people grow them for their beauty or seeds, they leave chemicals in the soil that can prevent crops like lettuce or beans from germinating properly in the next planting season. The professor notes that this information is especially useful in agriculture. Farmers need to plan their crop rotations carefully to avoid planting sensitive crops in soil recently occupied by allelopathic plants. Otherwise, it can reduce yield and impact soil health long term.
Personally, I definitely prefer learning through hands-on activities rather than just reading from textbooks or listening to lectures. I feel that when I physically engage with what I'm learning, like doing experiments, building models, or working on real-life projects, it helps me understand and remember the material so much better. For instance, in a biology class, we once dissected a flower to learn about its reproductive system. Reading about it in a book was fine, but actually seeing and touching the parts made everything much clearer. Also, practical learning keeps me more motivated and focused. It's more exciting than sitting and passively listening, and it helps me develop useful problem-solving skills. While textbooks and lectures give background knowledge, hands-on experiences turn learning into something active and meaningful. I believe this kind of learning prepares students better for the real world, where knowing how to apply knowledge is just as important as memorizing facts. In the conversation, two students share their views on the university's new quiet zones policy, which designates certain areas on campus where talking, phone use, and noise are strictly limited. The first student supports the policy. She believes it will help students concentrate better, especially during midterms and finals. She mentions that finding a truly quiet place to study has always been hard, and this policy will create peaceful environments where people can focus without distractions. On the other hand, the second student disagrees. He thinks the policy is too strict and unrealistic, especially in shared spaces like lounges or cafeterias where students naturally want to talk or collaborate. He worries that enforcing silence will make the campus feel tense and unfriendly. Personally, I agree with the first student. Many students struggle to find a quiet place to study, and having designated zones for focused work shows that the university supports academic success. As long as there are still social spaces available, I think this is a great initiative. The concept of anchoring bias refers to a cognitive bias where people rely too heavily on the first piece of information they encounter, known as the anchor, when making decisions. In the lecture, the professor explains how anchoring bias can affect judgments, even when the initial information is irrelevant or arbitrary. For example, the professor describes a study in which participants were asked to estimate the price of a product after being shown an initial high price, even though the actual price was much lower. Despite knowing the real price, their estimates were influenced by the initial high price, showing how the anchor affected their judgment. Another example given was in salary negotiations. If an employer starts with a high initial salary offer, even if it's not the highest they can offer, the employee may be influenced by that starting number, leading them to accept a lower final offer than they might have if the initial number had been lower. In both examples, the initial anchor heavily impacts the final decision, demonstrating the power of anchoring bias. The concept of allelopathy refers to the chemical interactions between plants, where one plant produces substances that can inhibit or alter the growth, germination, or survival of nearby plants. In the lecture, the professor explains that allelopathy is a natural form of plant competition, where certain plants release chemicals into the environment that affect the growth of other plants. For example, the professor mentions how black walnut trees release a chemical called juglone, which can be toxic to many plants growing nearby, preventing their growth. This allows the walnut tree to reduce competition for resources such as water and nutrients. Another example provided is how certain grasses in the prairie ecosystem secrete chemicals that inhibit the growth of smaller, slower-growing plants, ensuring that they maintain dominance in the area. These examples illustrate how allelopathy acts as an important survival strategy for plants, helping them manage competition and maintain access to necessary resources.